Part 64. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 648. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. For the past 3 days, Musian has been spending time in the heavenly palace. Apart from occasionally tasting the taste of Naxi, most of the time he has been absorbing the original spiritual energy and repairing the blood essence that dripped into the fairyland. Ruoxi, please go back to Jizhu and wait for me. I will leave here to join you after today. Musian returned to his original posture, walked in front of Ruoxi, reached out to grab her catkins, and carefully examined the beauty in the palace skirt. A thin ribbon gently outlines her slender waist, and her plump and straight breasts bulge to hold up the fabric, which also makes her cold and weak temperament seem to add a different kind of allure. A strand of hair hangs down on Guazi's face, and even if you look closely, you can't find any flaw at all. It's just the gentle eyes that make her less cold, but add a bit of femininity. Holding her hand so affectionately in front of concubine Shangyan made Ruoxi want to withdraw her hand shyly, but she still held it back. She just glanced at him shyly, and the warmth of the young man's palm made her cheeks flush with an intoxicating blush. When she thought of some of the things that happened here in the past 2 days, her eyes became even more shy. Even Musian had to sigh that Ruoxi's human heart was truly the best in the world. When the time comes, I will take you all out of Kyushu, Musian continued. There was worry in Ruoxi's eyes, and she said softly, does Mulang still plan to return to Kyushu? Now that she knows the truth about Tiandao, once Musian returns to Jizhu and Tiandao comes, and notices his existence, there will be trouble. As long as the creatures of the 9 provinces are gathered together, the way of heaven cannot disappear. Is there really a solution to this kind of existence? Even if you become an immortal, can you deal with the ways of heaven? Musian felt warm in his heart, knowing that Ruoxi was really worried about him. He gently held her little hand and whispered, there are still people in Kyushu who need me to save. I have to go back no matter what. Don't worry, I will let everyone around me fly to heaven. As long as they are still in heaven, they will not be affected by the rules and order. Tiandao will not liquidate all living beings in Kyushu. In the final analysis, she herself is the assembly of living beings. After the coming of heaven, only 2 types of people will be liquidated. One is the monk who violates the rules of heaven and earth and ascends to heaven. Secondly, she is likely to detect the natural furnace aura left by Musian from some of the female cultivators. As far as heaven is concerned, no living being in this world is worthy of being close to Musian, so the women related to him must be eliminated. After all, I am also the Lord of Heaven. When the time comes, we will all be in heaven. Do we still need to worry about heaven? Musian said with a smile. Ruoxi's delicate eyebrows gradually relaxed, she nodded gently, then turned around and walked out of the heavenly palace. Musian stared at Ruoxi's back disappearing from sight, then turned his head to look at the sect master who exuded a rich fairy charm and was extremely beautiful. Sister sect master, is there any weakness in the way of heaven? If you want to solve the problem of heavenly Dao, it is definitely not enough to rely on the drops of Deng Xianjing's essence and blood. At least Musian doesn't think he can handle that kind of existence. Concubine Shangyan at her peak could not handle it, let alone him now. However, concubine Shangyan only shook her head slightly, the way of heaven has no weaknesses. As long as there are still living beings in this world, and as long as all creatures still fear the way of heaven, the way of heaven will not disappear. Even if several great powers in Kyushu give up their resonance with the heavenly Dao, the heavenly Dao is still an existence that cannot be destroyed. Musian raised his head and looked at her, even if you become an immortal, you can't do it? Concubine Shangyan was very calm and said softly, ascension to immortality is just a realm, but it is impossible to completely eliminate all living creatures in the 9 heavens and 10 lands. Even if I can destroy the way of heaven, she will eventually be resurrected and born under the will of all living things. Musian was silent for a moment, then raised his head and looked at the woman in a gorgeous dress. What should we do? Concubine Shangyan gently stroked Musian's face, with a gentle look in her eyes. At this time, someone needs to stand up and lead all living beings to fight against the law of heaven. Do you mean to ask me to overthrow the chessboard and rebel, to overthrow heaven and earth? A trace of confusion flashed in Musian's eyes, and he asked, what should I do? Concubine Shangyan stared gently. The negative emotions of heaven and the arrow of heaven are now in my mortal body. From now on, as long as you seal me in the black box, you will know the rest soon. What to do? Why do you still like to be the Riddler at this time? Does the sect leader miss Mugwort again? Musian pondered for a moment and asked seriously, what will happen if you fail? Concubine Shangyan smiled and said, it won't matter if you fail. I have already prepared a backup plan. But you will probably be kept by Tiandao forever, and you will always be sealed by her in the sea of consciousness in her body. What to do? She asked suddenly. I don't want to do it, but do I have a choice? Musian sighed inwardly. Although my personal panel does not show that I am the protagonist until now, since it is because of me that Tiandao has feelings, then naturally it's up to me to end this. Have you never thought about what to do if you fail? Concubine Shangyan asked with interest. Fail? Musian chuckled and sighed. In the worst case, I'll just be her slave. Concubine Shangyan. Even Shangyan Fei couldn't help but be a little speechless. Is this what you think? Just a joke. He would naturally try his best to solve the thorny existence of the heavenly Dao, and he would not just sit there and wait for death. Musian lowered his head and kissed her red lips gently, and her lips had a thrilling soft touch. I'll go back first. After bidding farewell to Shangyan Fei, Musian walked straight out of the heavenly palace. But he found that the fairy in a green dress was still waiting at the door. She was looking up to admire the paper cranes in the sky, as if she didn't notice Musian's existence at all. Musian quietly approached Yao Meng, but before he made any move, he saw her side glance and said with a smile, Bairuoxi has been in the heavenly palace for 3 days, I think he should be very comfortable serving her. As soon as he opened his mouth, Musian couldn't hold it back. He thought Yao Meng should have returned to Zhuzhou first, because according to the original expectation, if Yao Meng was still in the heavenly palace, it would be impossible for Bairuoxi to enter the heavenly palace for such a long time. But he didn't expect that the other party was still outside the heavenly palace and let Bairuoxi stay in the heavenly palace for such a long time. Yao Meng. Musian wanted to say something, but at this time, Yao Meng had already stretched out a finger to his lips. No need to explain specifically, it's not like I forgot what I did with Miss Bai before. Yao Meng's voice was soft and soothing, but it reminded Musian of what he had done with the two of them in Lianji sect before. For a moment, he was a little moved again. Seeing the boy's silence, Yao Meng raised a beautiful arc at the corner of her mouth, and whispered in his ear, after the matter of the heavenly Dao is dealt with, you can try again in the heavenly palace. Together with Bairuoxi. No, she shook her head gently, stared into Musian's eyes, and said with a smile, it's okay to try again. The fragrance of the woman permeated Musian's body, and his originally desireless state of mind could not help but ripple. Yao Meng really burned when she should. Musian finally couldn't help it, stretched out his hand to hug the fairy's soft waist, and hugged her graceful figure into his arms. A sweet note floated from Yao Meng's red lips, but she did not struggle at all, letting the hands hugging her do whatever they wanted. She looked at him tenderly with compassionate and holy eyes. Where are you going after leaving heaven? World C. Musian said without hesitation, since the road to immortality is manifested in the world C, there must be many cultivators gathering there. At that time, it will probably become the main battlefield. Yao Meng nodded slightly. After confirming the place to go, she was warm with Musian for a moment and then left heaven. Musian closed his eyes slightly and returned to Lianji sect. He opened his eyes and looked at Shang Yanfei, who was sleeping. No wonder when I saw the sect master before, I felt that her spiritual consciousness was sometimes there and sometimes not. This mortal body could hardly bear Shang Yanfei's huge spiritual consciousness, so she had been suppressing herself, and even sealed herself with the fairy gold lock, so that she could barely stay in Zhuzhu. Looking at the woman's beautiful face, Musian couldn't help but reach out and gently stroke her pretty face after staring for a while, and then got up and left Lianji Peak. As a result, just as he stepped out of Lianji Peak, he suddenly felt a buzzing sound in his ears, and a dangerous breath came towards him. He turned his head and saw an unexpected uninvited guest appear in his field of vision. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 649. The woman who came into view was dressed very differently from Dongzhou. Her hair was black with brown, her figure was charming, her facial features were quite sexy, and her skin was an exotic wheat color. Her lips were plump and bright, and Musian's figure was reflected in her pair of sea blue eyes. Isis. When he saw this uninvited guest, Musian was a little surprised. He didn't expect that the owner of the immortal Forbidden Land would dare to step into the Lianji sect so openly. Isn't she afraid of the sect master's sister? What are you doing here? Musian asked quickly. Hearing this, Isis narrowed her beautiful eyes, looked at Musian with interest, and said in a delicate voice, "Young friend, Mu is really calm. I thought you would flee from here immediately after seeing me. This is the Lianji section. Do you think there is a way to take me away from here?" Musian asked with a smile. "Not to mention that the sect master is here, even if her mortal body is inconvenient to take action. Yao Meng and Ruoxi are also in Lianji sect. Even if Isis's real body came, she couldn't do anything to him, not to mention that she was just a clone." Isis raised her head and looked around the layout of Lianji section. She looked quite casual and said faintly, "This sect is full of taboo rules, plus the existence of Shang Yanfei. It is naturally impossible to take you away. After all, let alone me, even if the other taboo masters are added, Isis probably can't do anything to her." At the end of Isis's speech, her eyes went straight over Musian's shoulder and fell on the awakened Shang Yanfei. "Right? Shang Yanfei, or should I call you the original mother goddess?" Musian's eyes changed slightly, and he glanced at the charming queen in front of him inadvertently. Isis is the first taboo master of the immortal Forbidden Land. She has never abdicated, so she must have fought with Shang Yanfei in the past. It's not surprising that she guessed the identity of the sect leader. But Isis didn't guess it for such a long time. Why did she know her true identity now? "You came all the way from the immortal Forbidden Land just to confirm my identity." Not far away, the voice of concubine Shang Yan came. Under the snowflakes, her long hair fluttered in the cold wind, her raven black dress fluttered, her voice was soft, and her face showed no sadness or joy. "The block secrets have been gradually lifted. It's not surprising that you can deduce my identity as long as you remember what you experienced in the past. But you came to Lianji sect to see me." Shang Yanfei paused and asked with a smile, "Is it to confirm my identity or to confirm his identity?" Isis narrowed her beautiful eyes, and there was a hint of seductive temptation in her extremely charming eyes. She licked her red lips. "So, my guess is right. The strength of the Enlightenment realm, the natural furnace of the feathered realm, if the memory was not blocked, I should have guessed his identity long ago. He is the child who followed you in the past, the author of the heavenly court rules, right? The 9 forbidden lands were born very early. Isis is not a person, but a child created by the heavenly Dao. Although I don't know the entanglement between the heavenly Dao and Musian, Isis knows the various characteristics of the Lord of the Heavenly Court. For example, the Lord of the Heavenly Court was also in the Enlightenment realm when he was the strongest. It's not that he doesn't want to merge with the Dao, but that he can't merge with the Dao. Because the Lord of Heaven does not respect heaven and earth, but only respects himself, there is no Harem in this world that can match his Tao. This may also be a kind of balance, because his natural furnace is too strong. When he returned to the void, he had the natural furnace of the Hedeo realm. When he realized the Tao, he could already help the powerful people in the Hedeo realm to ascend to heaven. What about Hedeo? Could it create immortals who can ascend to heaven? The answer is no, there is no way to ascend to heaven in this world. But even so, the power brought by the natural furnace is already exaggerated. At least any female cultivator in this world, I am afraid that they can't refuse the blessing of the natural furnace. This is like in the game, others spend months or even years to practice a full level account, but you have a cheat. As long as you continue to practice with you for a period of time, you can reach the full level. If people can still ascend to heaven in a short time, this world would have lost its balance long ago. Concubine Shangyan's face was so calm that no emotion could be seen. She said softly, "What do you want to express?" Isis raised her eyebrows slightly, raised her hand lightly, and watched a snowflake fall into her palm and melt. She looked at Musian with a smile, and her charming demeanor seemed to have a unique charm. "The heavenly Deo will come in a while, I know your purpose, I want to cooperate with you." Cooperation. Musian, who was still listening to the conversation between the two, asked with great interest, "Aren't you the child created by the heavenly Deo? Do you want to betray her mother?" Isis curled her lips and said faintly, "She didn't establish the taboo rules for us. I can feel that my mother has her own purpose. Besides, I have been in the taboo land for so long, and I don't have anything to pursue. If I can enjoy the taste of the natural furnace in the future, maybe this originally boring life can be broken." For others, Isis's thoughts may be difficult to understand, but only ancient creatures like her who have lived for tens of thousands of years or even more than 100,000 years know that longevity will actually become extremely boring. In the past, the Qing emperor would not hesitate to sacrifice himself to suppress the first-generation demon emperor, and even after that, he did not have much thought of resurrection. This was partly due to this reason. It was only later that after living in Musian's natural furnace for a long time, I gradually discovered new pleasures. Concubine Shangyan did not say a word, but looked at Musian and gave him the choice. This was actually what she wanted Musian to do from the beginning. The Forbidden Lord cannot be killed. Even if he is killed, a new Forbidden Lord will be born in the future. But if Isis can be allowed to sit in the position of the Forbidden Lord and choose to stand in their camp, there will be no new Forbidden Lord born in the future. Just like she trained Muji to become the Lord of Taboo in the past. Musian pondered for a moment and said, "If you are willing to cooperate with us, I will be happy." Isis felt happy. Although this answer was within her expectation, when she actually heard the other party's answer, it still made people feel excited. However, at this time, I heard him continue, "But how do you prove that you are not a spy sent by Tiendeo, and that you will not backstab me in the future? Even a slave will backstab his master, let alone a partnership as fragile as paper." Isis stopped smiling and said, "I have no reason to stab you in the back." "But there is a way of heaven," Musian said. "For Tiendeo, it doesn't matter whether he is dead or alive, as long as Musian can stay in her sea of consciousness and be with her forever. No one knows whether your cooperation is behind the instigation of heaven," Musian continued. Isis was stunned for a moment, then looked at Musian with her beautiful eyes, and said, "How can little friend Mu believe in my sincerity?" Musian showed a gentle smile that was harmless to humans and animals. "It's very simple, just swear to the avenue." An hour later. After watching Isis leave, Musian withdrew his gaze and turned his gaze to the woman in front of him. Musian sighed softly and said, "The body you left in Juzhu seems to be getting weaker and weaker." He could feel that the secret that originally blinded concubine Shangyan was gradually fading away, and even Isis had remembered the lost memories of the past. This means that her body is already very weak. It doesn't matter, this body is already reaching its limit, and my plan has been completed. Concubine Shangyan looked at the handsome young man in front of her. When the road to immortality manifests, it is also when the rules of heaven and earth are at their weakest, because then the rules of heaven will affect the rules of Kyushu. The Lord of Taboo will definitely take advantage of this special time period to invite heaven to come to Kyushu at all costs. My true body cannot be manifested in Kyushu, so after this, only you can handle the way of heaven. Musian nodded and said, I know what to do. Concubine Shangyan also showed a charming smile and said softly, I believe you. Go to the Sea of the World, and end all this with your own hands. The Sea of World is the center of Kyushu, surrounded by oceans. Even if ordinary monks try their best, it is impossible to set foot on the island in the center of the Sea of World. In the past, the World Sea could be called the only pure land in Kyushu. It was easy to defend but difficult to attack, and it was difficult for ordinary people to approach. However, in the past 2 days, this island in the middle of the World Sea has been bustling with activity. The void-returning realm monks from various states have rushed here, and there are even a few powerful ones who are also staring at the road to immortality that has descended on the World Sea. Because of this, the peace of the World Sea in the past has long been broken. At dawn, the light of morning light falls on the sea, and the colorful golden light ripples on the sea. The girl in a blue dress was lying on the terrace of the temple, looking at the sea outside in a daze. Tang Sophie, the saint of the World Sea, has been cultivating in the World Sea since she said goodbye to Musian that day. She possesses part of the original witch's bloodline and is extremely talented. She is now at the 8th level of Void Return and is not far away from enlightenment. At this age, the 8th level Void Returner can be said to be a genius among geniuses even if you look at Jizhu. However, there is nothing she can do about this crisis in the World Sea. Not long ago, the elders of World Sea deduced the secrets of heaven and predicted that the law of heaven is likely to come to Kyushu in the next few days. It stands to reason that the coming of heaven should be a good thing for the creatures in Kyushu, because it will bring blessings to Kyushu. But they are different. The people of the World Sea can be said to be the descendants of the original witch. Although they didn't know much about the conflict between the original witch and heaven, they knew very well that the coming of heaven would bring blessings to Kyushu, but it would definitely not include the World Sea. When Tang Sophie thought of this, she sighed quietly in her heart. Now that the elders are preparing for the arrival of heaven, all she can do is practice hard every day, and there is nothing else she can do. Just thinking about it makes me feel a little depressed. Boom boom. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. Who? Tang Sophie couldn't help but ask. Because she was a little anxious these days, her tone didn't sound very friendly. Miss Sophie, I haven't seen you for a while. Why does your temper seem to be getting worse? Hearing the gentle voice of the young man outside the house, Tang Sophie instinctively frowned, feeling that it was not polite to call him by his first name. But soon she was stunned again, as if she thought of something, and suddenly stood up and opened the door. What came into view was a young man she didn't expect. Mr. Mew. She almost subconsciously asked, why are you here? Because I know Miss Sophie is worried about something, I came here to help you, Musian said with a smile. With the help of Yao Mang, he came to the World Sea about half an hour ago. But Musian did not immediately go to see the manifested immortal road, but came directly to the temple of the World Sea to see the saint. Tang Sophie asked with a trace of doubt in her eyes, Mr. Mew knows what I am worried about. Musian smiled and said gently, Heaven's way is coming, right? Tang Sophie's heart tightened, and she looked at Musian with some vigilance. Musian's expression remained unchanged, he just smiled and comforted her, Saint, don't be so nervous, I am also on your side. It's better to say that being able to open the black box left by the original witch means that I am destined to be the target of the heavenly Dao's reckoning. Tang Sophie's eyes flickered, Mr. Mew will rush to the World Sea, is it because you have some way to stop the heavenly Dao from coming? The coming of the heavenly Dao is an inevitable trend, just like a destined fate that cannot be changed. Musian stared into Tang Sufi's eyes and said softly, "So, there is no need to stop the coming of the heavenly Dao. Let her come." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 651. The coming of heavenly Dao is an irreversible trend. Tang Sufi had heard the great elder of the world say this more than once before. If not, she would not be so worried during this period. I thought Musian had some way to stop the coming of heavenly Dao, but unexpectedly, he came to persuade them to let heavenly Dao come. Musian continued to say, "I know what you are thinking, but blocking is not as good as dredging. Miss Sophie might as well think about it again." A trace of doubt flashed in Tang Sufi's eyes, and she looked at Musian and said, "I know that Mr. Mu is not the kind of person who will give up easily. Do you have any plans? For example, a plan to deal with heavenly Dao? Do you think I am an omnipotent immortal? The problem is that even if I ascend to immortality, I can't completely solve heavenly Dao." Musian nodded gently. "There are indeed some plans, but I don't know whether they will succeed." Tang Sufi frowned slightly. "Do you mean we bet? Bet that Musian's plan can solve heavenly Dao, or can prevent heavenly Dao from coming?" "I'm not asking you to gamble, but you can only gamble," Musian corrected. "The coming of Tiandao is like the arrow of fate, no one can reverse it, so all we can do is to make all the preparations before she comes." Musian continued, "The rest depends on some luck. Or if I am sacrificed under the last resort, Zhu may be able to restore peace." Although Musian does not think that Tiandao, who has desires, will be willing to maintain the rules of heaven and earth outside Zhu. Tiandao established 9 forbidden places in the past and tried to cover the rules of heaven and earth with forbidden rules, which already shows that Tiandao has some ambitions. Perhaps, she wants to truly control Zhu. Tang Sufi fell into a brief silence. She thought of the time when she was in Lianji sect. Musian opened the black box in front of her and the Son of God. From that time on, she vaguely guessed that Musian was the person the original witch was waiting for. And now he has personally found the world sea and made this request. It seems that there is no reason to refuse in terms of emotion and reason. In the final analysis, all they can do is to keep an eye on the Forbidden Land during this period, stop the summoning ceremony of the Taboo Masters, and delay the time of the coming of the heavenly Dao. But this is actually a useless effort. Even if there is no Taboo Master, the heavenly Dao will come during this period, because his coming is in line with the rules of heaven and earth. What does Mr. Mu plan to do when the heavenly Dao comes? Tang Sufi asked in a low voice. Musian showed a sunny smile and said gently, "The first thing after the coming of the heavenly Dao is probably to settle accounts with those who violate the rules of heaven and earth. In addition, those who are related to the original witch will probably be settled by her. Miss Sophie is worried about this matter, so she hesitated just now." Tang Sufi was silent. At this time, she heard Musian looking at her quietly and continued, "What if I say that I have a way to protect the world sea when the heavenly Dao comes?" Boom! Tang Sufi's heart suddenly beat wildly, her beautiful eyes sparkled, and she subconsciously looked up at him. "What is Mr. Mu's solution?" "If you can really protect the world sea, I can do anything." Musian interrupted quickly, "Miss Sophie, calm down. In fact, just follow what I just said and do nothing. I will take care of the rest. In fact, let alone a cultivator in the state of enlightenment, even if a great master of the state of harmony said this, it would be full of disbelief." But for some reason, when Musian said this, Tang Sufi inexplicably believed it in her heart. Maybe it was because he had opened the black box left by the original witch, or because his natural furnace had created several impossible things. She smiled brightly, her eyes rippling. I believe in Master Mu. Tang Sufei stood up and walked to the door. Suddenly she turned back and said with a smile, I will discuss with the elders of the World Sea, and then I will unlock some of the formations in the World Sea. If the formations are completely released, the Lord of Taboos might think there is a trick, and he might not dare to make any moves for the time being. Muzian looked at the door and nodded with a smile, then I'll leave it to you. The center of the World Sea. The golden red morning light fell on the sea, rippling layers of ripples, and the golden fragments of light were quite dazzling. But what was even more dazzling was the ladder that descended from the sky at this moment. The road to immortality. From ancient times to the present, countless great powers have fought for the purpose of ascending to heaven. Countless cultivators in Juzhu have heard that the spiritual energy in heaven is extremely rich, and as long as they ascend to heaven, they can live forever. However, the number of people who can finally ascend to heaven is too few. Even so, the appearance of the immortal road still made countless cultivators in Juzhu crazy. Right now, many cultivators are stepping on the ladder to heaven, hoping to ascend to heaven through the immortal road. But they didn't notice that in the void, at this moment, several eyes were watching all this coldly. Their pupils were indifferent, and if you look closely, you will find that everyone exudes an extremely terrifying and dangerous aura. The Lord of Taboos. On the day when the immortal road appeared, more than half of the 9 forbidden places appeared in the World Sea. Not to ascend to heaven, but to summon their mother. The gathering of all living things, the heavenly Deo. However, there is a formation left by the original witch in the past on the World Sea, and even the Lord of Taboo is unwilling to take risks. But fortunately, activating the formation requires a huge spiritual energy cost, and it needs to be continuously injected with spiritual energy. And today, the power of this formation is already extremely weak. As long as the heavenly Deo comes, the situation in Juzhu will be completely rewritten. By then, the Forbidden Land will also regain control of Juzhu. Isis, it's almost time. The Lord of Eternity looked through the void at the monks on the World Sea who were desperate for the road to immortality, and his voice was extremely cold. If there is a powerful person to intercept, this time we will directly sacrifice the taboo object. You should also know that the only possibility for a comeback is Mother. If you keep hiding your incompetence, there will probably be no place for us in the future of Juzhu. Hearing the words of the Lord of Eternity, a lazy response soon came from the void, stop talking nonsense, hurry up and start. After Isis's voice fell, a formation emitting sacred light quietly opened on the sea of the world. The summoning ceremony of the Way of Heaven has come at this moment. At this moment, Muzian was still sitting in Tang Sufei's room. He stood by the window and admired the sea view outside. Not far behind him was Tang Sufei, who had just returned to the room. She felt very complicated and didn't know if the decision she made was correct. But the elders just accepted her proposal. Because they also knew that the formation left by the original witch alone could not last too long. According to Master Mu's instructions, most of the formations in the World Sea have been removed. Now the Lord of Taboos is probably preparing for the descent ceremony, Tang Sufei said softly. Although she said she believed in Muzian, but at this moment, when she felt the terrifying aura that seemed to shake the world, Tang Sufei still felt a little unsure. For Tang Sufei, this was something that had never happened before. But this time, she was facing the Way of Heaven. Even if she had a strong heart of Taoism, she would inevitably feel a little uneasy. Muzian nodded gently and looked up at the center of the sea. It has appeared. Tang Sufei was stunned for a moment, got up and walked to the window and looked up at the endless sea. On the sea, the road to immortality descended from the sky, and the power of rules disrupted the rules of heaven and earth in Juzhu. And in the center of the sea, a complicated formation composed of countless runes appeared. The formation exuded a brilliant golden light, as dazzling and sacred as the sun. In the golden light, a woman seemed to be vaguely seen. She looked so holy, but soon, nearly half of the golden light was stained with black. Holy and strange. The incarnation of the heavenly Deo. The heavenly Deo was about to descend, and this summoning ceremony was accelerating the time of her arrival. Tang Sufei stared at the extremely holy and strange figure, and for a moment she was a little absent-minded. It was the first time she saw what the heavenly Deo looked like in human form. I didn't expect that the heavenly Deo's human form would be like this. Tang Sufei muttered to herself, staring at the heavenly Deo who seemed to be sleeping in the center of the sea. However, at this moment, the heavenly Deo, who had been slightly closed, seemed to have sensed something, and suddenly opened his eyes slowly and looked in the direction of them. Almost at that moment, Tang Sufei's breathing stagnated, and she seemed to have forgotten to breathe at this moment. Until half a while later, her body trembled slightly, with a look of shock on her face, staring at the heavenly Deo on the sea. Did I see it right just now? Heavenly Deo is looking at them. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 652. Time goes back to an hour ago. In the center of the sea above the world sea, a golden and black light wrapped around a woman. She exuded an aura that was enough to make creatures feel dangerous at first sight. No, not only creatures, but even the lords of taboos also feared her existence. If the existence of the original mother goddess symbolizes the 9 heavens and 10 earths, then the heavenly Deo symbolizes all living things in the 9 provinces, or, it can be said that all living things in the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Because, except for the 9 provinces, most of the other realms in the 9 heavens and 10 earths have no living beings. The only place where living beings survive, the living conditions of Shangtian are also extremely harsh. Most of the living beings that can survive in Shangtian can no longer be called living beings, but should be called monsters. This is also the reason why the heavenly Deo wants to create the Sabbath. She hopes that more living beings can be born in Shangtian. The more living beings there are, the stronger she is. The Lord of Eternity stared at the sleeping illusory figure of Mother with an extremely fanatical look in his eyes. The blazing and sacred light shone on his face. He was full of piety and knelt on one knee beside her. Among the several taboo masters present, no one hated Lianji sect and Shang Yanfei more than the Lord of Eternity. Because the shielded secret was lifted, he remembered all the things he had experienced in the past, and even remembered that his taboo item red dust leaf was taken away by Musian before. Now he urgently hopes that after the arrival of the heavenly Deo, he can settle everything and reset Zhuzhu back to the period when it was controlled by the Forbidden Land in the past. I'm afraid Shang Yanfei would not have thought that the road to immortality would come at this moment. The Lord of Eternal Life looked up at the figure in front of him that seemed to be a little illusory, but his face showed an unconcealable excitement. He remembered the memories that were blocked in the past, and also remembered the various defeats when he fought with Shang Yanfei in the past. At this moment, he just wanted to ask the heavenly Deo to come and settle all those who violated the rules of heaven and earth. Especially Musian. Even now, thinking of this person, the second taboo master of the ancient land of longevity was in a very depressed mood. A cultivator in the state of enlightenment should have been easily dealt with like stepping on an ant on the roadside, but the Lord of Longevity did not expect that he would be repeatedly plotted against. It was not until these 2 days that he remembered that even the will of the heavenly Deo was helping him. But now all this does not matter. After the coming of the heavenly Deo, everything will be over. We must speed up. If the rebels in Zhuzhu notice it, they will definitely try every means to stop it. The Lord of Eternity suddenly sent a message to several taboo masters. For some reason, he always felt an indescribable sense of crisis at today's summoning ceremony. Before the coming of the heavenly Deo, we must not relax. Isis raised her eyebrows slightly and nodded calmly. Muji did not say a word from beginning to end, but just yawned lazily, a little bored. Yan looked indifferent. She also participated in this summoning ceremony. Although she didn't know why Musian asked her to help with the ceremony, she just needed to obey. Yes, as long as she obeyed, she could enjoy the spiritual energy of the natural furnace again. When Yan thought of this, her exotic face was full of intoxication and obsession, and she licked her red lips inadvertently. Even the Lord of Eternity would not have thought that there were already 4 traitors among them, one of whom did not even participate in the ceremony of awakening the heavenly Dao and removing the shielding of concubine Shangyan. No, it's not that she doesn't want to participate, but that she can't participate. It has been too long since the Dongzhou restricted area left the Forbidden Land. If she pretended to surrender to the enemy at this time, the other party would probably not believe it. Isa stared at the phantom of the woman in front of her, who was the real body of the heavenly Dao, and couldn't help but narrow her eyes slightly. To be honest, she didn't know whether cooperating with Musian was the right choice. However, as she said before, she had completely looked down on immortality. Now she wanted to have some fun more than immortality. Therefore, she needs a natural furnace. She even swore to the great Dao for this. Of course, the premise is that Musian can deal with the coming of the heavenly Dao. At this time, Muji suddenly spoke and asked casually, "How long will it take for Mother to come?" There was a hint of impatience in her tone. The summoning ceremony this time was first proposed by the Eternal Lord. He was the first person to think of the past memories after Shang Yanfei's shielding of the heavenly secret was unlocked. And after that, he immediately invited cooperation to all the forbidden places. Although the major forbidden places went their own way and did not interfere with each other in the past, the number of human emperors in the Yuhua realm in Juzhu is gradually increasing. It's okay now, but in a few years, I'm afraid that all the Taoist companions around Musian will be Yuhua and ascend. By then, things will be tricky. Moreover, no one knows whether Shang Yanfei will be able to shield the heavenly secret again and stop the heavenly Dao after resting for a while. So what they can do is to let the heavenly Dao descend to Juzhu as soon as possible. For this reason, even if a large amount of his own essence is lost, it doesn't matter. After this, as long as the taboo rules can cover Juzhu again, he can absorb the essence and blood of the creatures in Juzhu for his own use and make up for today's loss. If nothing unexpected happens, within half an hour, the true body of Mother will be completely manifested in Juzhu. The Lord of Eternity spoke indifferently, his eyes blazing and looking at the woman in the center of the sea with awe. Muji raised her eyebrows slightly and silently glanced at the figure of the heavenly Dao that appeared and disappeared from time to time. I don't know what that guy wants to do. Not long ago, Musian wrote a letter to her. She thought Musian wanted her to help stop the coming of the heavenly Dao. Unexpectedly, he actually wanted her to speed up the progress with other taboo masters. Could it be, he already has a countermeasure? But that is the heavenly Dao, which has given the 9 forbidden places power and is an omnipotent existence. What can he use to suppress the heavenly Dao? Is Musian also in the world sea now? At this time, the beautiful eyes of the Lord of Order, who had been silent, flashed, and suddenly said something inadvertently. I can feel that the rules and order here seem to be different from before. The Lord of Order is the Lord of Taboos closest to the rules. When she met Musian before, she realized that this boy could affect the rules of heaven and earth. And in the current world sea, she also felt that the rules were affected. If I remember correctly, your red dust leaf was taken away by him, right? If I were you, I would go to the world sea to find Musian and kill him. The Lord of the spiritual ruins next to him spoke at this moment, fanning the flames. Musian. The Lord of Eternity had a hint of evil in his eyes, and when he said this name, his heart was burning with anger. He suppressed his anger and said slowly, "Don't worry, wait until my mother wakes up before playing with him." There are too many protectors around Musian now, and although he has only realized the Tao, he has shown strength beyond the Tao in the past. Before the arrival of the heavenly Dao, he did not want to add to the trouble and give other taboo masters an opportunity to take advantage of it. Dang! Dang! Dang. Just when the Lord of Eternity was talking to several other taboo masters, it seemed that an ancient bell sounded faintly above the sky. A magnificent ancient bell rang in the silent Kyushu, as if the gate of heaven was opened, and as if all living beings were praying devoutly and singing hymns together. The solemn bell also made all the creatures in Kyushu subconsciously stop their actions and look towards the place where the bell rang. The center of Kyushu, the world sea. On the gloomy sea, a dazzling light as bright as the scorching sun illuminated the virtual shadow of the heaven in the center of the world sea. And almost at the same time when the scorching sun shone, her figure, which seemed a little illusory, was gradually becoming clear and substantial. Her appearance was better than snow, her skin was like condensed fat, like flawless jade. A woman with a layered and complicated black dress outlined a gorgeous figure, and her long black hair like a waterfall woke up from the light intertwined with gold and black, and slowly opened her eyes. Like a god waking up, the ancient bell rang through the 9 heavens and 10 earths, and everything in the world seemed to be frozen at this moment, including time. It was as if all the rules were falling for her. Then, the sunlight disappeared. A pale white ball of light replaced the sunlight, and the soft and holy light illuminated the entire Juzhu, and all living beings were bathed in this holy light. The cultivators who were at the bottleneck of cultivation felt that their realm seemed to have a faint sign of breakthrough, and the newborn fetus stopped crying and bathed in the holy light of the heavenly Deo. The withered trees also rejuvenated at this moment, as if from the moment she came, Juzhu was completely renewed. The Lord of Eternity looked at the mother obsessively, he knelt on the ground devoutly, his eyes were burning. This is the heavenly Deo, the Lord of all living things, this is the power of the mother. The other several forbidden lords also knelt beside them. They had never been afraid when facing the human emperor in the Yahua realm, but when facing the heavenly Deo in the form of the true body, they were in awe from the bottom of their hearts. Even Muji also frowned secretly. When the majesty that could not be looked at directly appeared with the coming of the heavenly Deo, she felt a huge pressure in her heart. This is the heavenly Deo that created the forbidden land with one hand and wanted to cover the 9 heavens and 10 earths with its own rules, the will of all living things. At this moment, the eyes of several taboo masters present were full of fanaticism, and their eyes were fixed on the heavenly Deo. At this time, the Lord of Eternity took the lead in raising his hands and bowing, and said respectfully, "Please Mother, settle accounts with those who violated the rules. Please Mother, settle accounts with those who violated the rules." The next moment, the words sounded almost in unison. However, the heavenly Deo never spoke from beginning to end. The taboo masters did not realize that from the moment the heavenly Deo came and opened his eyes, he had never looked at them. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and stared quietly at a temple in the center of the world sea. That glance seemed to penetrate countless formations and reach a room in the temple. After a long silence, she showed a gentle smile on her face and whispered in a gentle and sweet voice, "I found you." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 653. I found you, diamond suit. Tiandao's appearance was flawless, and she whispered to herself with a sweet voice. It should be a collection of emotionless wills of all living beings, but her torch-like eyes clearly contained extremely complex emotions. It was as if the thoughts and love that had been mixed after tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years. At the same time, in the temple in the center of the world sea, when Tang Sufei noticed the gaze of Tiandao, she felt a tremor in her heart, a huge fear exploded in her heart, and a tremor from the soul arose spontaneously. "Mr. Mu, did you see it just now?" There was a slight tremor in her tone, which was an uncontrollable awe from the heart. All living beings would naturally be in awe of her. Tiandao, was he looking at us just now? Tang Sufei thought about what would happen after Tiandao came. For example, Tiandao might break through the formation of the world sea and settle all the rebels who violated the rules. But she didn't expect that Tiandao didn't even break the formation of the world sea, and her spiritual energy directly penetrated the thousands of formations of the world sea and looked directly at them. I don't think it's an illusion. Musian stood up and walked to the windowsill, looking up at the center of a distant sea area. Or, she should have come. Tang Sufi's face changed slightly, and she subconsciously looked up at the sea outside the windowsill. But she found that Tiandao, who had just awakened in the center of the sea, had disappeared from her sight at this moment. Mew. She just raised her head and was about to say something, but she saw a woman in a gorgeous black dress appear in her sight. No, it's not so much a black dress, but more like a long dress with complicated layers of spiritual energy, burning with black and gold flames, and golden fire spirits in her eyes. Tang Sufi's pupils suddenly shrank, and an indescribable fear surged in her heart. She raised her hands and pinched her fingers, reactivating the formation left by the original witch, trying to isolate Tiandao from them. Tiandao slowly opened his eyes, and in just a moment, the spiritual energy around him was instantly stripped away. Crack. In the central temple of the world sea, the formation constructed by the original witch produced a cracking sound. Like dominoes, when the first crack appeared, the formation broke one after another. The elders in the world sea realized that something was wrong, and they all worked together to inject spiritual energy and try to repair the formation. However, thousands of formations were shattered together in the next moment, and the fragments of the formation turned into a blazing light that completely illuminated the entire gloomy sky. Several elders in a certain hall vomited blood, their spiritual consciousness almost collapsed, and they staggered to the ground. The spiritual energy in the entire world sea was completely controlled by Tiandao. She just took a step forward, and the spiritual energy lifted her body and willingly crawled at her feet. The wind blew, and the long black hair was lifted up, and each strand of hair was clearly visible. Tiandao raised a white jade hand from his sleeves and stretched it towards Tang Sufi. I can't move. Tang Sufi was horrified to find that her body was completely unable to move, and there was no possibility of even resistance. This is Tiandao, the collection of the will of all living beings. Among all these living beings, no creature is her opponent. Tang Sufi's heart was filled with despair, and she could only watch the hand slowly reach out to her. However, at this moment, someone stretched out his hand and grabbed Tiandao's wrist. The sense of oppression that made people breathless just now seemed to disappear at this moment. Tang Sufi reluctantly moved her jade neck and subconsciously looked behind her. It was Musian. The strength of the Enlightenment realm in Juzhu is already considered to be the top one, but facing the Heavenly Dao, even the great power of the Unity Dao is under the control of the Heavenly Dao. No one can think of resisting the Heavenly Dao, let alone attacking her. But he stopped the Heavenly Dao and even directly touched the Heavenly Dao's true body. Tang Sufi's eyes flickered, her face was full of astonishment and disbelief. Tiandao didn't seem to mind this disrespectful behavior, just smiled, "Do you still remember me?" The smile was quite bright and cheerful, and the voice was full of sweetness that made people feel intimacy involuntarily. But the moment he looked into her glass-like eyes, he felt a heartbeat. And awe from the heart. Because there was no emotion in those eyes, just like staring into the abyss, deep and bottomless. At least when Tang Sufi saw Tiandao's eyes, she couldn't help but feel a deep fear in her heart, so that she couldn't think about how much information Tiandao had just said to Musian. Musian fell into silence, and after a while, he nodded gently, "Remember some. I have completely forgotten the past because of the blocked Tianji, but you still remember my things. I'm so happy." Diamond suit. Tiandao smiled gently, and the spiritual energy under her feet lifted her feet. The smile on her face was bright and moving, and the natural intimacy seemed to be unique in the world and extremely charming. Even Musian's eyes stayed on her face for a long time. He had never seen such a charming woman. That kind of charm cannot be described by words like beautiful and moving. Musian had seen too many beautiful women with national beauty. They are all very beautiful, but in Musian's opinion, none of them is as charming as Tiendeo in front of him. It's not because of her beauty, but because creatures have a natural sense of closeness to Tiendeo. It is a kind of innate closeness. Then are you willing to leave here with me, she continued to ask, her voice like a whisper, echoing in Musian's ears. That soft and sweet voice seemed to have an indescribable magic, which seemed to make Musian's eyes slowly open, and seemed to lose light slightly. Musian reached out and held Tiendeo's soft little hand. Under her gentle eyes and sweet words, he seemed to gradually give up thinking. Then, he was about to kneel on one knee. This is a matter of course. In Juzhu, any creature facing Tiendeo is just a child, and it is natural to be in awe and submit to her skirt. However, Tiendeo held Musian's hand before that and gently lifted him up. Her tone was full of tenderness and love. You don't have to do this. Let's go, Diamond Suit. Before the voice completely fell, the figures of the two had completely disappeared from sight. Only then did Tang Sufei collapse on the ground, her face as pale as paper, and cold sweat had seeped out of her forehead. Only then did she realize how big the gap was between man and the way of heaven. It was an unbridgeable gap, like the gap between heaven and earth. Even if you spend your whole life, you will never be able to get close to the way of heaven. A crack appeared in the space out of thin air, and the way of heaven brought Musian to the central sea area of the world sea. Almost when they saw this familiar figure, the eyes of the taboo masters changed. Musian. The Lord of Eternity and several other ancient creatures who wished Musian dead showed ecstasy on their faces. The way of heaven had just arrived, and he directly captured Musian, and he didn't even have the slightest room to resist. I didn't expect you to have this day. The Lord of Linxia couldn't help but sneer, looking at Musian with strong murderous intent in his eyes. It can be said that the current situation in Juzhu is almost caused by Musian. If it weren't for Musian's natural furnace that allowed the great masters of Hedeo to ascend to heaven, they would not have risked removing the block secrets and asking Tiendeo to come. At this moment, seeing Musian being taken out of the World Sea Temple by Tiendeo, the eyes of several taboo masters were full of ill will. Seeing that the murderous intent seemed to gradually permeate the sky above the World Sea, Muji's eyes flickered slightly, and he was ready to take action at any time. I heard from them that the current situation in Juzhu seems to be caused by you. However, at this time, a soft and magnetic laugh suddenly sounded, and Tiendeo raised his eyes slightly, and his voice seemed to contain a strong love. Don't you have anything to explain? What else is there to explain? Wouldn't it be better to kill this kid directly to avoid future troubles? The eyes of the Lord of Eternity flickered, with coldness in his eyes. However, just as he was about to make a move, he heard the clear voice of the heavenly Deo. If I am not mistaken, the disorder of the rules of the 9 provinces is also caused by you. Mulang Diamond Suit. The atmosphere seemed to freeze at that moment. The body of the Lord of Eternity suddenly tightened, and the faces of several lords of taboo also changed dramatically, staring at the two people in front of them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 654. The entire sea area fell into a deathly silence. Originally, after seeing the true body of the heavenly Deo appear, the faces of the taboo masters all showed a smile of victory. However, at this moment, such smiles were completely frozen on their faces. The face of the Eternal Lord was dull, and Muji widened his eyes and looked at the heavenly Deo in astonishment, even wondering if there was something wrong with his ears. Isis also showed a look of shock. As early as when Musian told her not to stop the coming of the heavenly Deo, but to cooperate with several taboo masters, she knew that Musian should have a backup. But at that time, she never thought that he had no backup, because he didn't need to prepare a backup from the beginning. The heavenly Deo they summoned itself was Musian's backup. For a moment, the expressions on the faces of the taboo masters froze on their faces, and they didn't wake up until an unknown period of time later. Their faces were replaced by astonishment, shock, and even unbelievable expressions. What did you just say? After a long period of stagnation, the Lord of Eternity finally couldn't help but speak. He wondered if he was hallucinating. The name Mulang spoken by the heavenly Deo was simply a magical feeling. The heavenly Deo, which represents the supreme authority of living beings, called a living being a name similar to husband. The Lord of Order looked at Musian in doubt. For a moment, he wondered what kind of magic potion this guy had given to the heavenly Deo. At this time, the Lord of Eternity pointed directly at Musian and said, Musian, although I don't know what you did to deceive the heavenly Deo, you did affect the rules of heaven and earth. Do you dare to admit this? If you admit it, you should accept the purification of the heavenly Deo. It was really hard for him to accept that he had worked so hard and spent a lot of blood and energy to ask the heavenly Deo to show its true body, but the result was such a development. In any case, Musian must die. Tiandeo looked at Musian with a smile, but saw a trace of difficulty on his face. He whispered, it is true that I affected the rules of Jizhu. Those monks who ascended to heaven also appeared with my help. But there are reasons for that, but no matter how you explain it, what has been done is done, and I have nothing to say. Musian looked at the woman in the black dress, lowered his head slightly, and said softly, whether you want to punish me or not, I can accept it. After all, I did violate the rules first in this matter. But at the end, the palm holding Tiandeo's soft little hand was a little heavier. Just such a movement made Tiandeo's heart tremble slightly, and the spiritual energy under his feet seemed to be slightly disordered. The humanity that Tiandeo possessed was given by Musian, and she naturally had no mercy on others. But Musian's every move, even any word he said, would make Tiandeo care. So much so that when he showed such an uneasy look at this moment, Tiandeo's heart almost melted. There was a smile on her calm face, and her tone was gentle but did not allow any disobedience. She said, violating the rules does not mean that you need to be severely punished. If all those who violate the rules are severely punished, there will probably be few creatures left in Jizhu. This statement clearly favors Musian. The Eternal Lord was anxious when he heard it. He was very angry, but he did not dare to get angry. He said sincerely, Mother, this child has violated the rules of heaven and earth beyond your imagination. He even corrupted the will of the heavenly Deo for his own use. The will of the heavenly Deo. This time, the heavenly Deo finally looked directly at Musian, with a sweet smile on her face, but that smile seemed to have no warmth at all. My will cannot be corrupted, but there are exceptions to everything. Her white and slender little hand gently touched Musian's face, and her fingertips slowly moved along his face, from the neck to the collarbone, and then to the chest, and gently drew circles on his chest with that kind of tingling feeling. You should have used the spiritual energy of the natural furnace to corrupt my will, Mulang. She raised her eyes and smiled at Musian's eyes. This picture is full of weirdness no matter how you look at it. A collection of the will of all living things looks like a woman at this moment, and she even calls a little monk Mulang. She even acts like a spoiled child. At this moment, the faces of the taboo masters are not very good. Muji and others are like this because they think that Tiandeo may be their opponent in the future. And the other taboo masters are vaguely aware of something wrong in their hearts. The scene in front of them is not the same as they imagined at the beginning. Logically speaking, Tiandeo should take action now to suppress all unrest, reset Jizhu, and let the taboo rules cover the rules of heaven and earth. But since she came, she has not even had time to take action, and she was charmed by a young man. I did corrupt your will. Under Tiandeo's tender gaze, Musian sighed and admitted it very frankly. The Lord of Eternity sneered and was about to say something. However, at this time, Musian stared at Tiandeo and said softly, "But that's just because you are not here, I can only place my thoughts on your will." "My will?" Tiandeo was slightly stunned, and there was a little more emotion in the smile on his face. "Speaking of which, isn't the will of heaven a part of her?" Musian's love for the will of heaven, in a sense, isn't that love for her? It's just that she is not in Juzhu, so Musian can only look for her will that stayed in Juzhu. So, corrupting the will of heaven was not his original intention, he just missed me so he was close to the will of heaven. Tiandeo seemed to have thought of something, and there was a hint of temptation in his grey eyes. "So, do you agree to be with me forever?" Musian nodded without hesitation. "Although my memory has only recovered a little, it is my honor to be with you. For this, no matter what the price, I am willing to do anything." For the first time, light seemed to appear in Tiandeo's dark and beautiful eyes without any emotion. She took Musian's arm, leaned her head in his arms intimately, and murmured happily, "I know Mulang will definitely change his mind. There is no creature in the world who is worthy of you except me. We are a match made in heaven." Diamond suit. "Wait for me to marry Dideo and Ran." Tiandeo wiped out all the evil spirits and covered the 9 heavens and 10 earths with taboo rules, and there would be no more obstacles for us to be together. But I remember there seemed to be many women around Mulang, right?" Tiandeo put his fingertips in front of his red lips, raised his eyes and thought about it with some embarrassment, and then said with a smile, "But forget it, after killing them all, Mulang will no longer miss them. By then, Mulang will be mine alone, and the 9 heavens and 10 earths will also be mine alone. No, they will be ours, and I will share my power with you, including my own power will also be yours." Just after hearing Tiandeo's address to Musian, the faces of several taboo masters were still a little ugly, as if they were under a haze. However, at this moment, after hearing Tiandeo's words, some of them immediately showed an unexpected surprise. The Eternal Lord was even more ecstatic. Although he didn't know why Tiandeo was obsessed with Musian, as long as Tiandeo could take action against those human emperors in the Yahua realm, he didn't believe that Musian would not be anxious at that time. "Friend Mu, you don't look very well." The Lord of Eternity pretended to be concerned and asked in confusion, "You already have a mother, are you still reluctant to leave your Taoist companions?" "But that's true. In the past, you had a very good relationship with those Taoist companions. I think you must have had physical contact with them, so it's normal to feel reluctant." I thought Musian would be anxious about this, but who would have thought that Musian actually looked over with some doubts and said hesitantly, "Why do you call me friend Mu? According to seniority, shouldn't you call me dad?" You. The Lord of Eternity was surging with anger in his heart, and he almost couldn't restrain himself from taking action. However, at this time, Musian seemed to be frightened, subconsciously took a half step back, and tightly grasped Tiandeo's soft little hand. Tiandeo's gentle smile just now was restrained, and his emotionless eyes looked at the Lord of Eternity coldly. Just that one glance, but it made the several taboo masters present feel a huge fear in their hearts, especially the Lord of Eternity who was targeted, and his scalp tingled instantly. "Must be patient." The Lord of Eternity suppressed his fear and was about to speak. However, at this time, Musian, who should have been hostile to the Lord of Eternity, took the initiative to plead for him. Musian's face was pale as paper, but he forced a smile on his face. "Forget it, anyway, he is worried about you and will question my feelings, so let him go. Don't destroy your feelings for an outsider like me." Who knew that at this time, Tiandeo tilted his head slightly and looked at the Lord of Taboo in front of him indifferently. "What are you talking about, Malang? They are just the products of my creation, but you are the creator who gave me humanity." She gently took Musian's arm, sweetly leaned her cheek on his shoulder, looked at the Lord of Eternity in front of her quietly as if she was looking at a dead person, and whispered, "Our feelings don't need others to question or alienate us." The terrifying spiritual energy pressed down in an instant, and the Lord of Eternity felt that his body was suppressed by some kind of power. Until the end, he could no longer bear the innate sense of oppression and subconsciously knelt in the air. Musian seemed to realize something, gently held Tiandao's white little hand, and whispered, "Forget it, a little grievance is nothing to me. If the Lord of Eternity holds a grudge against you because of my affairs, I will also feel bad." This word of praise and criticism, coupled with Tiandao's indifferent eyes that seemed to be looking down on ants, made the Lord of Eternity realize that something was wrong. He looked at Musian hatefully and wanted to say something else. However, in the next moment, Tiandao's eyes fell slightly. Boom! The spiritual consciousness of the Lord of Eternity was shattered on the spot. This scene made the remaining taboo masters present feel like they were falling into an ice cellar, and their scalps numbed instantly. "It's just a taboo master, just kill him." She gently took Musian's arm, and a sweet arc appeared on her li. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 655. The death of the Lord of Eternity made the hearts of the several taboo masters present tremble, and there seemed to be an indescribable fear in their hearts. It was a fear filled with despair. It was the despair of absolute crushing by bloodline. If it was just a simple fight, the taboo masters could still barely delay Tiandao for a moment with the help of taboo rules. But Tiandao is the creator of the taboo land. Her existence is like a bloodline suppression for the taboo masters, and there is no room for resistance. What made them even more desperate was that Musian had been sweeping over them from the beginning. Although he looked sunny and harmless, with their experience, how could they not see that he was full of bad water? So, the taboo masters all maintained silence, fearing that if they said one more word, Musian would touch porcelain them. "It seems that no one else has any objections to Mu Lang, that's good." Tiandao's jade-like slender hand gently rested on his chest, and he exhaled as if he was really relieved, and smiled. After all, recreating a forbidden place is a very time-consuming thing. What this means is that even Tiandao cannot create a forbidden place in a short time, Musian thought to himself. At this time, Tiandao looked around at everyone, and then said with a smile, "The will of Tiandao has just transmitted all the information of Juzhu to me." She raised her eyes slightly, pondered for a moment, and continued to smile. "When you expand the taboo rules outward, by the way, deal with all the creatures that violate the will of Tiandao. Juzhu belongs to me, and I don't need people who violate the will of Tiandao. The only human nature given to Tiandao is love, which is not all love, but only love. For Tiandao, even if all the creatures in Juzhu die, they will be reborn with the change of sun and moon. Musian is a creature of all things, but there is no Musian among all creatures. So Musian is unique. Let's go, Malang, I'll take you to a place first." Tiandao took Musian's arm, and when he turned around, a golden space channel appeared behind them. When Musian followed Tiandao into the channel, the several taboo masters present seemed to finally breathe a sigh of relief. Everyone had different expressions, but their expressions were more or less not very good. Musian didn't die, but the Lord of Eternity died. Is it really the right thing to ask the mother to come to Juzhu? The Lord of Order spoke faintly, looking a little unwilling. Mother seems to have a special feeling for Musian, and it seems that he can't be attacked. The Lord of Linxu had a cold face and said in a cold voice, "But don't forget, Musian is not our ultimate goal. At least after the mother came, the situation has been completely reversed. Yes, killing Musian is only one of the purposes of the taboo masters. Their real purpose is to let the taboo rules cover Juzhu again. You and I originally wanted to kill Musian because we were worried that his innate furnace would pose a huge threat to us. If the future mother keeps him by her side, he will no longer pose any threat to us." Another taboo master spoke up. His voice was cold and his expression was not very good. After this, the faces of several taboo masters all looked a little better. If you think about it carefully, it is true. As long as Musian is kept by Tiandeo, it doesn't seem to matter whether he is a natural furnace. However, at this time, Muji seemed to have heard a joke and suddenly laughed. The Lord of Order narrowed his eyes. Lord of Life, what are you laughing at? Don't you think what you said is interesting? Musian and Tiandeo have just met for a short time, and she killed a taboo master for Musian. If he really gets together with Tiandeo in the future, and often whispers in her ears in the future, do you, the enemies who once surrounded him, really have a way to survive? Muji's words were very plain, but they were like a thorn that deeply pierced the hearts of every taboo master. Muji smiled at several taboo masters, and did not say anything more. Instead, he calmly withdrew his gaze and turned to walk into the void. There was an extremely rich aura between heaven and earth. The golden light filled the sky, illuminating the blue sky. In the distance was an endless sea, on which a dilapidated and ancient ship was drifting. The sea breeze blew, and Musian came back to his senses from the shock just now. He subconsciously said, "Where is this place?" God. Tiandeo put her hands behind her back, walked on the beach with 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow, her hair blowing in the sea breeze. She turned her head to look at the boy and smiled. Every Sabbath in the past, I would let my will transfer part of the luck of Jizhu to this place, hoping that it can give birth to living spirits as soon as possible. But unfortunately, the spiritual energy of God is too abundant, and the luck is too weak, so it is difficult to give birth to living spirits. When Tiandeo said this, there was a little more regret in her tone. Then, she quickly smiled and looked at Musian, but it doesn't matter. When I really control Jizhu, I will transfer part of the luck of Jizhu to God. At that time, living spirits will definitely be born here, and my power will become even greater. Tiandeo continued with a sweet and gentle voice, by then, there will be no more threats to erase my personality in the 9 heavens and 10 earths, and Mulang can be with me forever. Musian was silent for a moment, and said, "Your personality will be erased because of the restrictions of the rules of heaven and earth. If I can help you block this part of the rules, the premise is that you need to give up the power of Tiandeo. Are you willing?" Tiandeo was slightly stunned, and then showed a look of emotion, and gently reached out to touch Musian's face. Mulang really has me in his heart, I am really happy. But why should I give up my power? I can control the 9 heavens and 10 earths and make Jizhu my own. If I give up my own power, wouldn't it be too stupid? But I know Mulang cares about me, so I won't blame you for making such a request. Mulang will wait for me in Shankang next. Wait until I deal with the traitors in Jizhu, and come to pick you up. Kingdi, Yehuang, Palace Master, anyone who ascends to heaven must die. It just so happened that they gave her a chance to attack. After all, Kingdi and others had violated the rules of heaven and earth. If she attacked them, she would not be restricted by the rules. Tiandeo walked in front of Musian with an elegant step. She lowered her head slightly and kissed the boy's lips with her rosy lips. Then she kindly reminded him, "Malang, don't run around. There are dangers everywhere in the world of heaven. You just need to wait for me to come back." Diamond sued. If it were in the past, Tiandeo would directly use the arrow of Tiandeo to wipe out Musian's existence and let him stay in the sea of consciousness to accompany him forever. But now there is no need for this. The original Mother Goddess is extremely weak, and no one in the 9 heavens and 10 earths can stop her. Next, just push forward all the way. After dealing with all the things, you can travel the 9 heavens and 10 earths with Malang. Musian seemed reluctant to leave, hugged Tiandeo's slender waist tightly, and whispered, "Are you leaving just after you arrived?" Her dress was completely made of spiritual energy, and just by hugging her delicate body, he seemed to feel the whiteness and delicateness of Tiandeo's skin. Tiandeo stroked Musian's face with a smile, and whispered, "I also want to practice dual cultivation with Malang now, but there are important things now, and I must deal with them first." After she finished speaking, she suddenly turned around and disappeared into the sky. Muzian watched her back as she left, and only after nearly half an hour, he confirmed that she had left, and then he slowly exhaled. It's really tiring to lie to an omniscient and omnipotent God. Fortunately, I had honed my acting skills at the level of an actor in the fish pond before. Muzian raised his dark and calm eyes and whispered, Yuanluo, it's time to come out. In Juzhu, with the advent of Tiandao, the taboo masters finally no longer had any scruples. Almost at the same time, in the 8 forbidden places, the taboo rules turned into grey mist and spread outward, as if revealing the deep darkness in the depths of the universe. In the area covered by the taboo rules, the legs of the creatures instantly softened uncontrollably and knelt on the ground. And the creatures that violated the rules of heaven and earth in the past were instantly turned into dust. The heavenly Dao tore open the cracks in space and appeared above Juzhu from the distant heaven. The black skirt outlined by the aura danced with the wind, and the majestic golden eyes like the gods seemed to burn with fire spirits, and the eyes opened and closed, which was breathtaking. The aura of the entire Juzhu seemed to be deprived at that moment, and the rules of heaven and earth were completely used by her. Because she is the heavenly Dao, who holds the power of life and death and balances the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Living beings are immortal, and the heavenly Dao is immortal. Even the Yahuwaran Huang who transcends the rules cannot defeat such an existence. At this moment, the extremely huge spiritual consciousness of the heavenly Dao almost instantly covered the entire world and was looking for something. After just a moment, Tiandao slowly opened his eyes with an interesting smile on his face. King Di and others were no longer in Juzhu. It seemed that Malang really didn't want to be with her. He still missed his Taoist partner very much. Should he have sent them to the heavenly palace before she came? But it didn't matter. Anyway, as long as she was still in Juzhu, it was enough. Tiandao's eyes looked directly in the direction of Lianji sect. As long as she could devour the essence of the original mother goddess, she would be able to go to the heavenly palace freely even if there were restrictions on the rules of the heavenly palace. When Malang was alone, his love would naturally only be given to herself. So, the original mother goddess should be dealt with first. Tiandao took a step forward from the void. Just as she was about to go to Lianji sect, she suddenly found that the taboo rules that were just spreading out suddenly stopped. Everything around seemed to be dyed grey by some force. The dark clouds stopped floating, the creatures stopped moving, and the Lord of Taboos also moved very slowly, and the grey part was affected by time. Boom! As if someone had ascended to heaven and opened the gate of heaven, a gorgeous column of light descended from the depths of Lianji sect. Its light was soft and powerful, like water that embraced everything, and majestic and inviolable. In the column of light, a woman in black clothes appeared silently in the field of vision. Tiandao narrowed his eyes and said softly, "Original Mother Goddess." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 656. Tiandao raised his hand and waved, as if he could clearly hear the crisp sound of glass shattering on the ground. The originally grey world returned to color, and the frozen time began to flow slowly. In the 9 provinces, countless creatures looked up and stared. Although they could not see their form, they could feel the boundless pressure of the spiritual energy. It is as gentle as water, but it suppresses everything in the world. But unlike heavenly Dao, although this spiritual energy is majestic, it does not target any living being in Kyushu. After all, she is the original mother goddess, the mother of the 9 heavens and 10 earths. All living things are her children, so she will not target anyone. In Kyushu, there are not a few people who violate the rules of heaven and earth and the will of heaven. In the final analysis, if even a little mistake is included, then the Lords of Taboo will have too many lives to liquidate. Although the original purpose of Tiandao was not to liquidate all living beings, the fact that the Lord of Eternity was easily killed previously has caused some Taboo Lords to feel fear. They just want to take advantage of the opportunity to expand the taboo rules and swallow the blood essence of some creatures for their own use. At least then, when facing the way of heaven, there may be room for resistance. However, with the arrival of the original Mother Goddess, the taboo rules no longer expanded. Several taboo lords looked blankly in the direction of the Aya sect, and it was unclear whether their expressions were confusion, fear, or shock. At the same time, Luo Tan of the immortal dynasty in Yuzhou stood in front of the terrace, looking into the depths of the sky in the distance. Although ordinary people could not see anything, she could clearly feel the presence of Lianji in Dongzhou. Deep in the sect, a will as majestic as the sea is coming. At the same time, in the Tianhe garden of Lianji sect, Linling, who had been in seclusion, seemed to sense something. Her curled eyelashes trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her clear and bright red eyes. The princess in her compartment was also disturbed by this original spiritual energy and opened her eyes suddenly. The cauldron in the body can no longer be suppressed, as if it is about to break through at any time, become feathered and soar. However, at this moment, the princess was attracted by this original spiritual energy. She subconsciously raised her head and looked out the window, and subconsciously said, "What's going on with this spiritual energy? It doesn't seem to belong to Kyushu, but I feel very familiar." As soon as she said this to herself, Linling, who was wearing a white dress, walked to the windowsill with her skirt in hand, staring at the back mountain of Lianji Peak with her red eyes. A very rare and emotional light appeared in those red eyes. After following concubine Shangyan for so long, Linling never knew that concubine Shangyan was actually the original Mother Goddess. Boom! There was a terrifying thunder in the sky. Linling and the princess looked up almost at the same time and saw the gathering cloud of calamity. The feathering heavenly disaster has arrived. Southern Wilderness. Regina walked out of the space crack and looked towards Dongzhou, with surprise in her eyes. Not long ago, Musian wrote a letter telling them about the coming of heaven. But even if Tiandao's spiritual consciousness is spread throughout the entire Kyushu, he will only be aware of the existence of Shuiyi, the god of the southern wilderness, but not the container Regina that Shuiyi prepared for him in the past. Although as early as when Miji Angzan mentioned the matter of Heavenly Dao and the original Mother Goddess, Regina had a hunch that the original Mother Goddess was probably still there, and was in Kyushu. However, when I found out the identity of the original Mother Goddess at this moment, I was still a little unbelievable and even shocked. Did he say in the letter when he could take action? Shuiyi's voice sounded in Regina's heart. Regina whispered, "Just wait until he returns. I think it should be soon." At this moment, under the sky of Kyushu, golden light shrouded the cloudy sky, and thick lead-colored clouds slowly moved in from the distance, seeming to cover the entire sky of Kyushu. The roar of thunder resounded, two monstrous spiritual energies confronted each other, and a calamity was brewing. At this moment, whether it was the Lord of Taboo or the mighty power of 9 provinces, there was an unprecedented sense of awe in their hearts. On the one hand, this awe comes from the way of heaven, and on the other hand, it comes from concubine Shangyan deep in the Lianji sect. Even the taboo lords who have lived forever, in those endless years, have only felt such terrifying spiritual pressure from Tiandao. But I never thought that it turns out that there are no existences in the world that can compete with the way of heaven. Silence. Profound. Tiandao stands proudly under the sky, her black skirt made of aura outlines her graceful figure, the aura under her feet surrounds her, and her white jade-like skin makes her aura so sacred and charming. But the original Mother Goddess is also so sacred. Although she is not manifested in her true body, but faces the way of heaven in a mortal body, her aura is equally majestic. Primary Mother Goddess. Tiandao narrowed his eyes and finally whispered the enemy who isolated him from Kyushu. "Tiandao, long time no see." Concubine Shangyan also said softly. The two stood quietly under the sky, far apart, but every word they spoke could be clearly transmitted to each other's ears. and the words he spoke seemed to turn into vast spiritual energy and spread out, like ripples, causing countless spiritual energy storms to occur in the space. They looked at each other and were speechless. Just looking at each other like this, it seems that murderous intent is condensed in the space, constantly compressing and brewing, making people a little breathless. The whole world seemed to be trembling. I didn't expect you to be alive, but you are so weak, can you really stop me? Tiandao's face quickly raised his eyes, and a charming smile quickly appeared on his beautiful and holy face. She could sense that concubine Shangyan was not the concubine Shangyan of the past. Although concubine Shangyan was still not to be underestimated, she did not have the astonishing aura of the original mother goddess from the ancient times. At that time, even the law of heaven could not do anything to her and could only avoid the edge temporarily. Concubine Shangyan stretched out her palm, and in the black mist, 9 fairy gold locks were wrapped around her. The 9 fairy gold locks were set up in formations and sealed in 9 different locations in the world, in order to limit her power to prevent this mortal body from being unable to bear the spiritual consciousness and collapse. She carelessly played with the fairy gold lock in her hand and said in a soft tone, "It doesn't matter whether he is strong or not. To me, as long as he always loves me deeply, it is more important than anything else." Tiandao was stunned for a moment, and then, as if she heard some joke, she couldn't help but let out a melodious laughter. "Love you deeply? Do you really think he still loves you deeply? Would you like to guess where he is now? Who was he with just now?" Tiandao's eyes grew colder, but his smile was always sweet and moving. "Mu Lang was always with me just now." As if she was deliberately irritating concubine Shangyan, she showed a sweet and ironic smile. "If I hadn't come here to deal with you, we would probably be living a happy life in heaven now." But I can see that he still misses his Taoist companions." She put her fingertips in front of her red lips, tilted her head slightly to think, and continued, "Wait until I absorb your essence, just go to heaven and completely stop his thoughts." Concubine Shangyan's expression was always gentle, as if she was tolerant of all things. She said softly, "Have you ever thought that if it weren't for your possessive desire, if it weren't for your desire to completely control the rules of the world, maybe you could have stayed with him in the past, instead of being cut off from Kyushu by me?" Tiandao looked at concubine Shangyan with doubtful eyes. "As long as the rules of heaven and earth remain unchanged, sooner or later my personality will be purified by the rules. How can I be with Mu Lang? Also, everything in Kyushu belongs to me. Of course Mu Lang is mine as well. Why should I share him with others?" "No," Tiandao quickly shook his head gently, with a charming and seductive smile on his face. "Even if I don't use brute force now, he is finally willing to stay by my side." She raised her head and looked at concubine Shangyan with a smile. "It's a pity that you couldn't see how he relied on me when he was by my side just now, and how eagerly he wanted to kiss me. The aura of the natural furnace cauldron is really great." I thought that concubine Shangyan would be angry when she heard this, because she also loved Muzian deeply. However, there was only a playful smile on her face, and she slightly raised her arrogant chin and looked at her condescendingly, as if looking at a defeated dog. Tiandao suddenly stopped smiling, her eyes sharpened, her beautiful eyes fixed on the original mother goddess. "Why are you laughing? It's true that I haven't kissed him much." Shangyan Fei's eyebrows were soft, and she said softly in an extremely gentle tone, "I just took possession of his lips and even his body. My body now is filled with his aura. If I want, I should be able to have a child of his at any time, right? I heard that the will of heaven controls all living things in Kyushu." She smiled sweetly. "How about you come and give the child a name after my and his child is born?" Tiandao's eyes suddenly sank. Boom! In the sky, the vast calamity clouds descended quietly, as if to indicate the jealousy and anger of heaven towards the original mother goddess. The calamity cloud turned into a series of shocking thunder dragons, rushing towards the depths of Lianji Peak. However, Concubine Shangyan just looked at her tenderly and said softly, "Actually, you overlooked one thing. I have indeed spent a lot of effort to stop the cause and effect of the arrow of heaven. It is true that I am not as strong as I was in ancient times. But..." Concubine Shangyan paused slightly. Tiandao suddenly felt that the spiritual energy that was originally under his control seemed to have turned against him, and was actually gathering in the direction of concubine Shangyan. The thousands of rules that originally fell at her feet suddenly became ineffective. Concubine Shangyan slowly raised her eyes, as if a mandala slowly bloomed in her pale golden eyes. "Just because I've become weaker doesn't mean you've become stronger." Click. There seemed to be a faint sound of chains breaking. Immediately afterwards, there was a sound of breaking one after another. In the black mist, the 9 immortal gold locks were completely shattered. Tiandao's eyes suddenly fixed on concubine Shangyan. To be precise, it was behind concubine Shangyan. Musian did not know when he appeared behind concubine Shangyan, holding a black box in his hand. When concubine Shangyan's body was sucked into the black box, her spiritual consciousness was like a wisp of smoke quietly drifting along the road to immortality in the center of the world sea. Until the moment when the spiritual consciousness floated into the heaven, the original mother goddess deep in the heaven opened her eyes silently. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 657. Malang. How could he be here? When she saw Musian appearing in her field of vision, an incredible thought flashed through Tiandao's mind. But soon afterwards, she seemed to understand something, and a dangerous smile appeared on her face. It seems that Malang didn't really want to surrender to me from the beginning. You finally chose the original mother goddess, didn't you? Her eyes, as if through thousands of ancient buildings, instantly locked onto Musian. Although she was extremely surprised when she saw Musian's appearance just now, Tiandao seemed to have completely regained her sanity at this moment, looking at Musian with a seductive smile. Tiandao's appearance was so sacred, but this sacredness seemed to reveal endless dangers. With her blooming smile and dangerous words, Musian seemed to see a stunning enchantress. She seemed to really have the intention to kill. Even though he was far away in the Lianji sect, Musian noticed that Tiandao's murderous intent had locked onto him. "Don't worry, I won't kill you." As if he had heard Musian's inner voice, Tiandao had a sweet smile on his face. "But if I catch the bad boy who likes to play tricks, you will never leave me again. I will keep you by my side forever, bind the furnace with the fairy gold lock, and make you an ordinary person." Tiandao was like a high god, slowly raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Like a verdict from heaven, the rules of the whole world were under her control again. Shang Yanfei looked down at the creatures of Zhu with a peaceful look, then raised her eyes and looked back at Tiandao. "Change places, you don't want too many creatures to die and weaken your power, right?" As she spoke, the spiritual energy was like ripples on the water, weaving her snow-white dress more gorgeously, emitting a sacred and charming glow from her body, and also setting off her skin to be snow-white and flawless. A space crack appeared behind Shang Yanfei. "It seems that you are still very confident in yourself. I hope that your strength is half as good as what you just said." Tiandao smiled. Behind her, a space crack also appeared. The next moment, the figures of the two disappeared at the same time. In the void, the two people who controlled the power of rules started fighting. At the same time, the Lord of Taboos had a cold face and tried to step into the Lianji sect to take Musian out. Tiandao gave them an order at the moment when he just made a move. "Take Musian out and seize the black box in his hand. As long as the black box is unlocked and Shang Yanfei's real body left in the mortal world is destroyed, the arrow of heaven and her huge negative emotions can be liberated again. You know, even the original Mother Goddess in the past took a lot of trouble to seal the arrow of heaven, and figured out a way to transfer the negative emotions of heaven through two bodies, until finally, everything was sealed in the body of the mortal world. If it is liberated again, the original Mother Goddess will definitely be unable to take care of herself. The Lord of Immortality stretched out a hand, and that hand seemed to turn into a huge palm and stretched out towards the Lianji sect, as if to lift up the entire Lianji sect. The original Mother Goddess is not here, but it doesn't mean that anyone can touch her at will, right? However, at this time, on the road to becoming an immortal, a pleasant fairy sound like the sound of nature sounded, and also pushed the Lord of Immortality's outstretched hand back. The Lord of Immortality suddenly raised his head and looked, but he was shocked to find that since when, a fairy in a green skirt appeared under the sky. She pinched her fingers with one hand, looking down at all living beings from a high position as if she was pitying all living beings. Kingdi, haven't you ascended to heaven? Why can you come directly to Jizhu? The Lord of Immortality was shocked. It stands to reason that Kingdi and others should have ascended to heaven, so the way of heaven could not find them. But at this moment, she appeared in Jizhu. Who told you that the only way to ascend to heaven is to become an immortal? At this moment, a cold and arrogant voice came to the ears of several taboo masters again. When they raised their heads, they saw another figure standing above Lianji sect at some point. The Demon King. No, not only the Demon King, Gong Lianyu is also in Lianji sect. I thought you had ascended to heaven to avoid the heavenly Dao, but I didn't expect you to dare to descend to Jizhu. The Lord of Order looked coldly in the direction of Lianji sect. Wait until the original Mother Goddess is dealt with, then it will be your turn. There will be no good end to resist the sky. The Lord of Longevity also took a step forward. His temperament was majestic, his eyes were like torches. I have never been born in the past, but I am not really afraid of you. When the Hedeo realm is not bound by the rules, it is equivalent to the ascension of the feather. During the advent of the heavenly Dao, the rules of heaven and earth are completely controlled by her, so the heavenly Dao can easily rewrite the rules, making the taboo masters immune to the restrictions of the rules. The current Lord of Immortality is very confident and is not afraid of enemies in the Yahua realm. The way of heaven is nothing more than the will of all living things. When she conflicts with the will of all living things, she can no longer represent the will of living things. Everything is just her own selfish desire. Yao Meng smiled softly, and a green seed appeared in her palm. She threw the seed gently. Then, countless vines emerged from the ground and quickly swept towards the direction of the Lord of Immortality. A rich spiritual energy spread suddenly at the feet of the Lord of Immortality, and the spiritual energy transformed into directly wrapping the vines. Then, the vines broke section by section. If you include the 3 Ascension Realm Spirit Dragons and the Princess of Yunzhou who are undergoing a tribulation, are there 5 in total? The Lord of Immortality spoke slowly. If it were in the past, it would indeed be difficult to deal with, but you seem to have underestimated the heritage of the Forbidden Land. Behind the several taboo lords, nearly 9 powerful men from the Hedeo realm appeared. These are taboo creatures that grew up in taboo places in the past. Although they are not as good as the taboo lords who hold taboo objects, they can still be close to the strength of the feathered ones. At this time, the Lord of Order looked up at the young man in white robe who had been sitting quietly under the pavilion, with a bright and moving smile. Musian, if you don't want all of your fellow Taoists to perish here, you'd better hand over the black man's hand. Xia, surrender at your mother's feet. If something happens to one of your fellow Taoists accidentally and they die, I will be heartbroken when I see them. At this moment, the eyes of the taboo lord and even the taboo creatures were looking at the young man sitting under the pavilion deep in Lianji Peak. He was wearing a white robe and jade belt embroidered with gold thread. He was holding a cup of tea in his hand and drinking tea with his lowered eyes. As if he doesn't care about everything happening here. Shensu, dressed in white, seems to have a soft radiance on her body, which is the blessing obtained after absorbing the original spiritual energy. All living creatures will have a natural awe and affinity for this spiritual energy. Musian, did you hear that? Seeing that Musian still didn't speak, the Lord of Order looked a little colder. She took a deep breath and said in a cold voice, "Okay, since you refuse to speak, let me wait until I capture you and then let you see how ugly your Taoist companion's death will be." At this moment, Musian seemed to have lost interest. He stood up and walked out of the pavilion, sighing softly, "I keep saying these two sentences over and over again. It's so boring to just fight and kill." As soon as he opened his mouth, the Lord of Taboo, who was originally planning to take action, was stunned for a moment, wondering why he said this. At this time, Musian's eyes swept across their bodies and said thoughtfully, 1, 2, 3, 4. Are there a total of 17 Taboo Supremes? Without being restricted by the rules, they are quite each of you Yameng, and the others have to fight against 6 Supreme Beings, which is really too much pressure. The Lord of Order sneered, "Since you know, then why don't you consider surrendering?" Musian suddenly asked with a smile. His face was handsome, and there seemed to be 9 foxtails slowly unfolding behind his back. This was fine for the Supreme, but for the several female Supremes present, he seemed to have some kind of charm at this moment, so much so that even just now the reprimanded Lord of Order couldn't help but look dazed. Tiandao can only allow you to ascend in a short period of time. Even if the taboo rules cover Kyushu in the future, on the surface you are the masters of Kyushu, but in fact, everything is still under her control. Musian lowered his eyes and glanced at the empty teacup, and said softly, "But if you become my person, any female cultivator will be able to break through the limitations of the rules of heaven and earth in the future. Even ascending to heaven." His words were very calm, but there seemed to be some kind of magic power in them, which made several of the female Supremes present feel in a daze, and actually felt a little excited. In the Lord of Taboo, Nyan and Isis' eyes flickered slightly, and they subconsciously looked at Musian, seemingly anxious. Although the spiritual energy of the Tiansheng furnace is huge, it cannot hold up to several people taking turns to absorb it. No matter what, we cannot allow the number of people to open a silver party to increase. The Lord of Immortality seemed to have noticed that some of them were wavering, and reminded him in a cold voice, "Don't be fooled by Musian's words. Even if you surrender, he will still be alive. If Mother discovers that some of you have rebelled, you will all remember the fate of the Eternal Lord, right?" Musian betrayed Tiandao and chose to side with concubine Shangyan, so he was destined to be Tiandao and their enemy. When Musian heard this, he suddenly smiled as if he had heard something interesting. "According to you, if I are caught by you, I will die, right?" The Lord of Immortality raised his eyebrows slightly. "Do you think the 3 ascended realms can always protect you? Or do you think the broken body of the original Mother Goddess can suppress the way of heaven and save you?" 17 verses 3, How do you win? Musian smiled and put down the teacup. "Do you dare to swear to Deo Deo that if I stand in front of you, you will definitely kill me?" This sentence made the Lord of Immortality frown. He thought of the tragic death of the Lord of Eternity. Mother's obsession with Musian has exceeded his imagination. In this case, no one knew that Mother would definitely kill Musian after catching him. After all, this was the first time even he saw Tiandao being so persistent on a certain creature. If he really kills Musian, and God knows about it afterwards, I don't know what the reaction will be. The Lord of Immortality didn't want to talk nonsense with Musian anymore, and sent a message to the other Taboo Supremes, "You are responsible for holding back Qing Emperor and others, while I go and capture Musian." There was a coldness in his eyes, and he had sworn in his heart that even if Musian survived, as long as he fell into his hands, he would definitely take this opportunity to make the other party pay for his rudeness. 17 Forbidden Supreme Beings. Even with the protection of the Qing Emperor, Musian could not be safe and sound. However, Just when this thought flashed through the mind of the Lord of Immortality, he suddenly felt a sweetness in his throat, and his chest was pierced by a sharp blade made of spiritual energy. When he reacted, it was too late to resist, and the spiritual blade had already pierced his spiritual consciousness directly. The Lord of Immortality slowly turned his head and looked, and a wheat-skinned woman was reflected in his pupils. She held a weapon condensed by spiritual energy in her hand. Sis. The Lord of Immortality murmured as if he couldn't believe it, "You actually betrayed the way of heaven." Almost at the same time, Muji and Yan also took action, but this time, the other lords of the taboo reacted and quickly retreated. The Lord of Immortality staggered back, his spiritual consciousness was damaged, but there was a strong hatred in his eyes. The Lord of Order widened his eyes in disbelief and said angrily, "You actually chose to betray your mother." Muji played with the black notebook in her hand, her voice clear and pleasant, "Don't say it so harshly, I have never been a creature created by the heavenly Dao, so how can I say betrayal? If you must say it, Mu Wanji is my mother." Yan's eyes were gentle, "I am tired of this monotonous and boring life, but Mu Lang can give me supreme happiness. As long as you experience it once, you will understand how wonderful the happiness that seems to ascend to heaven is. But it's a pity that you won't have the opportunity to experience it." The Lord of Order interrupted coldly, "You won't have it either. Those who betray the heavenly Dao will not have a good end. What if the three taboo masters betrayed? Do you really think that this situation can be rewritten by you? Even if you count the three of you, it is impossible to defeat the 14 Supremes. She was interrupted by a pleasant girl's voice the next moment before her voice fell. 6 are not enough, what about us? The Lord of Order turned his head suddenly, only to find that a girl in a purple dress appeared behind him since some time. Lingxian. She was standing on Kunpeng's back at this moment, and there was also a man in a black robe with his hands behind his back standing on Kunpeng. The Lord of the Forbidden Zone of the previous generation, Lingxuan's father. At the same time, in Yuzhou, the western regions, and even the northern territory, which had never participated in the affairs of Zhuzhou, there were also powerful people coming out. They all realized that this was a rare opportunity. Once the heavenly Dao succeeded, Zhuzhou would be controlled by the taboo rules. They would not have a chance to turn over at that time. The Lord of Order had a cold look in his eyes, and he suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of Yunzhou. "Daipen Emperor, what are you waiting for?" A sharp cry came from the depths of Yunzhou, and a golden light swept out of Yunzhou. He had made a deal with the Lord of Order in the past. The Lord of Order used a fairy medicine in exchange for the loyalty of Daipen Emperor. But before Luo Tan could refine the elixir, the way of heaven had already come. At this time, the Forbidden Land was forcing him to take sides. If he didn't come out, he would be liquidated later. Luo Tan stepped out of the void in white jade boots, looked at the tall man standing behind the Lord of Taboo, and whispered, "Emperor Daipen, the heavenly Dao has lost the people's hearts, it's not too late to turn back now." Emperor Daipen sneered, "The heavenly Dao has the blessing of all living things. Now the rules of heaven and earth and the rules of taboos are all controlled by her. What's more, there are so many vacancies in the Forbidden Land now. After the heavenly Dao settles the accounts, I can also become the Lord of Taboo, occupy a part of Zhuzhou for my own use, and live forever. What's more." He stared sharply at the pavilion deep in Lianji Peak, and looked at Muzian hatefully. "The hatred between me and Muzian in the past has not been settled yet. You delay the others, I will capture Muzian." After saying this, Emperor Daipen turned into Kunpeng and flew rapidly towards the direction of Lianji Peak. His speed was too fast, so fast that people couldn't even react. Lingxuan's face changed slightly, and he was about to stop it. However, at this time, the Lord of Order stepped forward with a smile and stopped her. "Don't be anxious, Princess of the Forbidden Zone. Why don't you play with me first?" A great battle broke out, and the sky seemed to be shattered into countless pieces. The great Pen Emperor took this opportunity and appeared in front of Musian almost in an instant. A sneer of success appeared on his face. Among the people present, no one thought that he had not yet revealed the true speed of his Kunpeng clan in the past. And at this moment, in order to catch Musian, he burst out his true power at this moment. However, Musian's expression was still calm. He gently put down the teacup, and at the moment when the great Pen Emperor's palm was about to touch him, he suddenly raised his eyes slowly. Boom! In an instant, the great Pen Emperor's brain was shocked, and he saw that behind Musian, it seemed that a sky gate opened with a bang. Faintly, it seemed as if thousands of bells were ringing, as if praying for the coming of the Lord of Heaven. A rich light flowed down from the sky, reflecting a tall figure in a white robe. Musian's eyes were filled with golden flames. Almost before Dapen Emperor's hand touched Musian, his right hand grabbed Dapen Emperor's face. Dapen Emperor's movements were obviously slow. When he woke up, he found that his furnace seemed to be sealed by some kind of power. Pure World Green Lotus. How is it possible? Why do you have the Pure World Green Lotus? The great Pen Emperor suddenly raised his head, but when he saw the pair of majestic and solemn eyes, his pupils suddenly shrank, and a shocking and horrified thought flashed through his mind. Yahua Realm? No. Even in those Yahua Realm people, he had never felt such a terrifying sense of oppression. Ascension. There is only one Ascension realm in the world, and that is the original Mother Goddess. There is only one person who can refine the drop of Ascension realm blood left by the original Mother Goddess. Only the Lord of the Heavenly Court who is born with the furnace can control that drop of blood. If the original Mother Goddess is the only Ascension realm in the world, then Musian is second only to him. In the past, in order to avoid being noticed by the Heavenly Deo, he almost never used that drop of Ascension realm blood. But now the Heavenly Deo is still fighting with Shang Yanfei and has no time to take care of this side. Musian grabbed the head of the great Pen Emperor, and then turned around and smashed it hard on the ground. At the same time, countless golden halos appeared behind him, and in the halos, it seemed as if thousands of swords were ringing. This was Gong Lianyu's Taoist magic, and with the protection of the Sword Fairy, he could also use this Taoist magic. Musian took out the measuring ruler from it. The amazing power made Dapen Wang's pupils slowly dilate. The feeling of being suppressed by this absolute power made him feel extremely humiliated, and he regretted it in his heart. Even now, Dapen Huang couldn't figure out why a cultivator in the state of enlightenment would burst out with the power of ascending to immortality. Musian. Before the voice fell, the measuring ruler penetrated Dapen Wang's spiritual consciousness. With reluctance and regret, this once powerful man in Yunzhou completely disappeared. The golden light in Musian's eyes gradually faded. At this moment, the pavilion was quietly shielded by an invisible formation. People from the outside world can no longer spy on everything here. Looking out through the pavilion, one can see the mighty Zhu fighting the Lord of Taboo and the fish in his pond. The last step is left. Musian raised his hand and stretched his waist, sat down next to the stone bench, and said, "Heavenly Will, it's your turn." A woman wearing fairy gold armor appeared silently beside Musian. Her bright and dazzling golden hair was scattered, setting off her cold and noble beautiful face. The tightly wrapped fairy gold armor did not reveal any skin, but it perfectly outlined her figure. Heavenly Will shouted in a cold tone, "Master." Musian gently hooked his finger, and Heavenly Will seemed to understand and walked to his side very skillfully. Then, he knelt beside him, looking well behaved and obedient. If there was no sun shining behind her, which was extremely dazzling, and the sacred aura on her body, no one would have thought that this woman was actually the agent of the Heavenly Deo in Zhu, the will differentiated from the Heavenly Deo. The will of the Heavenly Deo put its cheek on Musian's thigh, and snuggled beside him like a cat sticking to its master. Musian looked down at the blonde beauty kneeling beside him, and said in a gentle tone, "Next, I will give you all the natural furnace and cauldron aura after I ascended to heaven. Are you willing to accept it?" In Musian's gentle words, she slowly raised her head, and her cold and beautiful eyes gradually rippled with moist and emotional luster. Obviously, the heavenly Deo was fighting with the original Mother Goddess. Logically, she should send down the heavenly calamity to suppress those rebellious rebels in order to help the heavenly Deo. However, at this moment, her mind was full of only thinking about the master in front of her, and she just wanted him to do everything he wanted. "Of course, my master." She reached out and gently stroked Musian's thigh, and said in a sweet and respectful tone, "Please, master, make a mess of me as much as you want, Diamond Suit." Looking at the plot, I think everyone should be able to guess that this book will end in a day or two. At least the main storyline is almost over, but whether to finish the book here or write some more chapters about the Heavenly Palace when the time comes, it's up to you to decide. Reply here if you want to continue writing the Heavenly Palace chapter. Reply here if you want to finish directly. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 658. The Void. This is a world without any living creatures. Under normal circumstances, no living creature can survive in this world for a long time. Yes, living creatures cannot survive. But the primordial Mother Goddess and the heavenly Deo are obviously not in the category of living creatures. Although the heavenly Deo is also a product created by the primordial Mother Goddess, the heavenly Deo who controls the rules has been as powerful as the primordial Mother Goddess in the past, not to mention that the primordial Mother Goddess she is facing now is much weaker. But it should be a battle that one side should crush, but the heavenly Deo feels that it seems that it can't take down this annoying woman. Because both sides control the rules, no one can do anything to the other in a short time. But as time goes by, the advantage of the heavenly Deo will only become more and more obvious. Because she is the will of all living creatures, as long as the living creatures are still there, they can continuously provide her with sufficient nutrients. Logically speaking, as long as the entanglement with the primordial Mother Goddess continues, and the primordial Mother Goddess's spiritual energy is completely exhausted, this battle will be the victory of the heavenly Deo. But Tiandeo was obviously a little anxious at this time. Because she was experiencing something she had never experienced before. Being humiliated in person by the primordial Mother Goddess. Yes, at this moment, the primordial Mother Goddess's behavior was almost the same as humiliating in person. Do you think that after you sacrifice the arrow of Tiandeo, his existence will be erased by you, and I can't find him? Shang Yanfei was dressed in a gorgeous dress and looked at Tiandeo with a gentle face. The spiritual energy between the two sides kept colliding with each other, and the mobilization of the power of rules almost became a tug of war, with no clear winner. However, her next words completely broke Tiandeo's defense. "I reversed time from the past. When you were still outside Juzhu preparing to control the 9 heavens and 10 earths in the future, he had already been following me and calling me sister shortly after he was born. In fact, it was all thanks to you. If you hadn't used the arrow of heaven to forcibly erase his existence, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to train him from childhood, watch him grow up, and train him to be the boy I like. Do you think that as long as you can control the 9 heavens and 10 earths, control all rules, and be above all things, everything will be yours?" Shang Yanfei asked with a smile. Tiandeo's face was very cold. "You don't have to shake my will in this way. I have given up my original idea now. I won't kill you, but I will let you watch how Mulang finally became mine and surrendered to me." Shang Yanfei smiled softly. "Really? So you really think that as long as you get him, he will be yours?" Maybe when he surrendered to you, he was still thinking about his sister Shang in his heart. After all, I watched him grow up since he was a child, and even raised him to adulthood with Mu Wanji's clone. Shang Yanfei's voice was extremely gentle, but every word was heart-wrenching. From the day he was born, the first person he saw was me. When he grew up, I became his most trusted sister. I kissed him and became his first love. After that, I used paper cranes to send messages to him and established the first contact. After entering the sect, he has a secret crush on me. As long as I beckon him, he will be willing to go to bed with me, and you, at this point, he has zero trust in you. Even if you win in the end, you will only get an empty shell without a soul, and you will never get his feelings. Shang Yanfei stretched out her slender jade hand like white jade and gently placed it on her full and upright chest. The snow-white dress set off her figure to be extremely gorgeous. She smiled and said, "Because everything about him has been left here with me." She looked at Tiandao's cold expression and said slowly, "Do you think I am just deliberately angering you? If you really think so, I don't mind showing you the memories in my mind in the form of pictures. Look at how much he has done for me, and how he was obsessed with me when we were practicing dual cultivation." The spiritual energy in the void exploded, and the power of rule seemed to be shaking. Under the sky, a sharp blade as bright as the scorching sun fell towards Shang Yanfei. Tiandao's black dress danced with the wind, and his hair flew. She suddenly raised her eyes full of anger. "If you really want to die, I don't mind sending you to death now." Shang Yanfei's face was still gentle and calm. "You already believe what I said, right? I believe that he has called the sect master sister countless times in the past and pleased me in my arms, and you have never experienced all this, because you are Tiandao. The weight of love you give to others is something that no one can bear. He is still afraid of you, but he will not love you." Tiandao's eyes were filled with anger, and he wanted to tear the mouth of this bitch directly. Tiandao is ruthless, and it is reasonable that Tiandao will not be angered. However, Muzian gave Tiandao human nature, so everything involving Muzian would cause Tiandao's emotions to fluctuate. In the final analysis, the existence of her was born because of Muzian. However, slowly, Tiandao gradually calmed down. She stared at the gentle eyes of the original mother goddess and suddenly smiled. "You are deliberately provoking me. You are already very weak, but you want to force me to fight with you now before that, so that you can drag me down, right?" Yes, concubine Shang Yan is already very weak. She was already very weak when she reversed time and reset the world. And when Shang Yanfei gave the power of the past and future to Wei Mengru, she is actually no longer at her peak. Now she can fight with Tiandao only because she and Tiandao both master the rules of heaven and earth. But as time goes by, Tiandao will inevitably take the initiative. After confirming this, Tiandao's expression has calmed down. She folded her arms across her chest, standing in the air, and looked at Shang Yanfei with a smile. "There are my children outside Zhuzhu. I don't need to defeat you urgently. I just need to wait for their good news and wait for your spiritual energy to run out. No matter how much you say, Mu Lang will be mine in the future. I have plenty of ways to make him forget you and his Taoist companions, and let him be obsessed with me wholeheartedly. No matter what you did to him in the past, he will be mine in the future." So. Tiandao sneered, "You don't have to think about angering me with those boring words, not to mention that all of that is just your fabrication. You are just jealous that I will control the 9 heavens and 10 earths in the future." However, before the voice fell, Shang Yanfei suddenly showed a charming smile. Before Tiandao understood why this woman was laughing, she heard a familiar voice suddenly coming from her ear. "Sister Sect Master is so beautiful." In addition to this voice, there seemed to be a faint impact sound of the bed being tortured, as if it was about to fall apart. Tiandao suddenly raised his head and looked, only to find a picture in the void. In the picture, a handsome young man was lowering his head to kiss a woman's red lips. His eyes were so obsessed and affectionate. And this was exactly the picture that Tiandao had imagined countless times in the past. That was the first time Muzian suppressed the fire for Shang Yanfei. Looking at Tiandao, whose eyes were vaguely filled with anger and jealousy, Shang Yanfei slowly played with a strand of hair and smiled, I'm not jealous of you, after all, when you were still planning to control the 9 heavens and 10 earths, I was practicing dual cultivation with him. Do you want to guess who gave him the original spiritual energy in his body now? She smiled and said, do you need me to show you that picture?